As a novice home cook, few things seemed more pointless and, quite frankly, a little more daunting than making homemade bread. First of all, you can get great bread at the grocery store, so why bother? And also, doesn't it require tons of experience and precise measurements and special equipment? No. We're going to dispel all those myths today with a delicious roasted garlic and rosemary loaf that is, quite frankly, one of, if not the best things we've made all season long. I hope that in a few short minutes you'll see that you need to get into the kitchen and give this loaf of bread a try. It is simple, comes together in less than 4 hours, and if you don't like roasted garlic or rosemary, add whatever flavor components you like. Now, what goes better with fresh baked bread than butter? Nothing. But soup is pretty high on that list, so we'll be wrapping up our commitment for 5 vegan recipes today with a hearty Tuscan white bean and kale stew, and for those a little more indulgently minded, we'll whip up a loaded baked potato soup with not one, but 2 types of smoked meats. Let's get after it. Alright, let's begin with our bread. And apologies for the lighting, I was doing this the night before, but you can certainly do it the day of. Go ahead and cut the top quarter off of a whole head of garlic, and you're going to then put in just enough olive oil, maybe a couple of teaspoons to moisten the top of that, and season it with some salt and freshly cracked pepper. Now once you've done that, go ahead and fold that up tightly in some aluminum foil and put it on a baking sheet in a 400-degree oven for 35 to 45 minutes, maybe a little longer if needed, but you want it to be soft to the touch and nice and golden brown and caramelized. Once that's done, we can start on our dough with 1 packet of active dry rapid rise yeast, a teaspoon of sugar, and 1.5 cups of warm H2O. Mince up enough fresh rosemary to give yourself 1.5 to 2 tablespoons worth, and squeeze all that soft, sweet, gooey garlic out of its papery skin. Once that's done, you're going to want to go ahead and mince that up kind of into a paste. Should leave you with a couple tablespoons of that as well. Into our water for our dough, we're going to put in a little bit of salt and our garlic and rosemary mixture. And all you need for this is a big bowl and a wooden spoon or spatula. Once that's done, start shaking in 3 cups of all-purpose flour, a little bit at a time, incorporating each batch as you go. I would normally use a wooden spoon for this, but I couldn't find it. And as you can see, I didn't even sift the flour. I'm really trying to hammer home the point that this is a very simple bread that doesn't take that much precision other than just the basic ratios between the flour and water. So what you're going to do is work this around in the bowl, trying to collect those packets of dry flour and pockets of flour that haven't yet received any moisture, and work them into the wet part of the dough. So once you've done that enough to the point where you can actually turn it out onto a work surface and it's no longer sticking to your hands, go ahead and get a little bit of flour down on the board. Maybe you might have some left from your initial 3 cups. And turn your dough out. And we don't need to knead this a lot, but you want to give it 2 to 3 minutes just to incorporate that board flour so that any wet parts of the dough get dry, or any dry parts get hydrated, so forth and so on. Once the dough is tacky but no longer actually sticking to your hands, like that, you're ready to let it rise. Go ahead and oil that same bowl up, no need to get anything else dirty. Form the loaf into a nice oval or round shape, and then plop it right in the bottom of that bowl. Give it at least an hour, but if you needed to go longer, that would be fine. There's our puffy boy 1 hour later. Go ahead and spoon that out gently onto a floured work surface once again. And now we're going to employ a technique known as the tug and stretch. Okay, I just made that up, but basically you're going to take one side of the dough, pull it up and over the other side, and then just keep repeating this. You want to do it 4 or 5 times, basically just trying to laminate the dough slightly, work in some of that board flour, and develop a little bit of gluten. Now, you see how that side I'm holding up there has some weird kind of little knobs on it? Yeah, that needs to go down onto the board, and we're going to use our hands and kind of spin it around in a ball, using the friction of the board and the dough to kind of tuck those sides in on the bottom. Back into the oil bowl for 30 minutes. Good night. Go ahead and take this time to get your hot box to 450 degrees and your cooking implement in there to preheat. Now, a Dutch oven would be best, but a large pot or pan that you can cover with a lid and will give enough room for the bread to rise will work just fine. Go ahead and take some parchment paper. That's optional, but it does help get the bread out once it's cooked. And use the oil in the bowl to oil up your hands so that you can very easily turn the dough over. And we're actually going to go in with that seam side on the top. That's going to give us a lovely texture and finish to the bread when it comes out of the oven. So get it situated in the middle of your cooking vessel, lid up, and into the oven for its first bake, 30 minutes at 450. After 30 minutes, we're going to go ahead and pull it out and inspect it. Caution, contents will be hot and steamy. So it's already looking like bread, but not like a nice loaf of bread. So back in it goes for another 10 to 20 minutes until the inside is cooked through to about 200 to 205 degrees if you want to measure it, or just measure it like that. Does that look perfect and absolutely delicious? Then yeah, it's probably done. Give it at least half an hour to rest and then admire your creation. You can hear Anubis come running for this. Look at that perfect crumb on the interior. Little flecks of rosemary in every bite. I think we need a soup to go with this. So let's begin with our Tuscan Italian bean and kale stew. Now, I was pointing out those fennel fronds there because they're not going to go in our stew, but we do want to save them for garnish. Now, cut the fennel in half and then take a look at that core down the middle. We don't want to lose that. So as you're cutting it up or bisecting it again, make sure to keep that intact. And at this point, we can kind of treat it as we would an onion. Just cut it down one way and then across the other way into a relatively fine dice. This stew is going to cook quickly despite the verbiage stew, so we want to get all of our vegetation into small pieces. Go ahead and cut a carrot in half and okay, let's try that again. Okay, cut the carrot in half and then into planks, and you know the routine, into little sticks and then back through into a nice even fine dice. Do the same thing with one medium onion. I'm actually going to go through and make a couple horizontal cuts as well, just to make sure that we do get that nice fine dice on our final product. A couple tablespoons of oil go down into a large pot, and in with your onion first. Go ahead and start to give that a little head start to saute. We don't want any big bites of raw or hard onion in our stew. Take a couple twigs of fresh thyme and fresh rosemary and tie a little string around them. This is known as a bouquet garni, but you can just call it herbs wrapped in a string so I can remove them easily. Now go ahead and add your carrots and fennel and give those 3 or 4 minutes to begin to soften. As we wait on that to happen, let us note our rib of our kale, which we've discussed before. Nobody wants to eat that, so pull the leaves away from the rib. And honestly, if you're not a fan of kale, this stew would be probably just as good without it, but it really does bump up the healthy factor of it, and also the color and texture as well. So next up, we're going to go in with 5 crushed cloves of garlic. I know some cloves are larger than others, so just put in as much as you want. This is really very much a, like most stews, one that you can alter to your tastes. See, I'm going to add in a little bit of crushed red pepper, maybe a half teaspoon. And we're going to go ahead and deglaze the bottom of our pot here with some dry white wine. Got about 1/4 cup there, just enough to loosen up any brown bits and fond that may have developed. As that go ahead and dries out, we're going to add in our kale, about 3 cups total once chopped up, a generous seasoning with fresh cracked pepper and kosher salt, and now 8 glorious cups of veggie stock. And honestly, get good veggie stock here. If you don't make your own, buy the top shelf stuff because it is a major flavor component in the dish. Go ahead and stir everything to combine. Add in 1 drained 14-ounce can of chopped tomatoes or diced tomatoes, and also 2 drained cans of large cannellini beans or white bean of your choice. Additional salt to taste. And then of course I added our bouquet garni as well. We simmered that for about 15 minutes. And to thicken it up, I'm going to use a immersion blender. Don't forget to take out that bouquet garni. Now, let's talk about what to do if you don't have one of these fancy contraptions. One, you could buy one. They're not that expensive and they come in handy, but you can also use a regular blender. Just ladle out a couple cups of the soup, blend it up to a thicker consistency. The starches in the beans will help thicken the soup. and then return the blended mixture back to your soup. You could even, in a pinch, use a potato masher to kind of mash some of the vegetable products up to accomplish the same result. No matter how you do it, once you're done, go ahead and add in a couple tablespoons of very freshly minced parsley, as well as the zest of 1 lemon and the juice of 1 lemon as well. This really helps to brighten up all the flavors in the dish and balances out the earthiness of the beans and the kale. Serve that up with a couple of fresh lemon slices, as well as your fennel fronds. And of course, you have to serve it up with that lovely homemade bread. But let's say you wanted something a little cheesier. How about a loaded baked potato soup with not 1 but 2 kinds of smoked meats? We'll start off with 1 link of andouille sausage. Now, I don't always use this, but I had it lying around and turned out pretty amazing, so I'm going to recommend you find one as well. Go ahead and dice that up and get it into a large bowl, along with 4 strips of bacon that you're going to cut into tiny little largons. Break those up and put them down in the pot. Don't need any fat because there will be plenty that will render out of the sausage and bacon. As they're cooking, go ahead and mince up 1 stalk of celery, a couple cloves of garlic, and half of a large white or yellow onion. As your meat begins to render all of its fat, make sure you stir it around, and once it's pretty well cooked through, remove about 75% of it, leaving just a little bit behind to cook in the soup itself. Add your celery and onion, it should be about 1 cup total, and stir that around for 4 or 5 minutes until it begins to soften and turn translucent. Once that's done, you can add your garlic, cook out for a minute or 2, and add a little more oil if needed. We need about 3 tablespoons of fat or so, to which we will add 3 tablespoons of flour to make a roux. Go ahead and stir that around, cook the flour until it is nutty and fragrant, and then add 4 cups of veggie broth. You could certainly use chicken broth as well. Once that's done, you're going to want to go ahead and cut up your potatoes for your potato soup. I'm using Yukon Golds, but russets would be fine as well. Cut them into a small dice and add them to your stock. Next up, we're going to go in with a little bit of dairy, 4 cups of whole milk, and then you're going to go ahead and raise the heat and bring this up to a simmer and cook for 15 or 20 minutes until the potatoes are softened. Of course, you want to season it well with salt and pepper. Potatoes need a lot of seasoning. Now, after that 15 or 20 minutes has passed, we're going to add some cheese, and you could certainly put more in, but I'm going in with about 4 ounces of Gruyere. Cheddar would be fine, Monterey Jack, whatever you have on hand is going to work. And then our good friend the stick blender comes back into play. We're going to go ahead and blend the soup up just enough to make it creamy. Since we're not actually adding any cream, blending the potatoes with the stick blender will help the starches cause the soup to thicken, and something else that'll help would be that cheese. Go ahead and turn the heat off, stir in your cheese, and prepare your garnishes. In my case, I'm using some green onions. I'm going to bowl this up. I also put a little bit of sharp cheddar on top, along with our reserved bacon and andouille sausage. And it would not be complete without yet another loaf of that delicious roasted garlic and rosemary bread. And there's a big bowl of winter comfort just for you. Well, friends, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed what you saw here today. If you've ever made anything on this channel that didn't come out quite like you expected, or you've never made anything you've seen here at all, this bread is the place to start. It's phenomenal. Speaking of things that are phenomenal, come back 1 week from today for our holiday send-off. We'll show you a fantastic dish to serve for your sweetheart or loved ones or friends and family if and when that ever becomes possible again. As always, thanks for watching, and you get out of here and go make something warm, crusty, and delicious.